If you've ever felt like you genuinely want to start, but your body acts like the task is dangerous, this video is going to hit close. You open the document, you stare at it, you suddenly need water. Then your room looks messy. Then somehow, it's midnight. And the weird part is, you're not lazy. You care. Sometimes you care too much. You can feel the pressure sitting in your chest. You know what needs to be done. You may even imagine how good life would feel if you finally started. But when the moment comes, your brain goes blank. You delay. You overthink. You promise yourself tomorrow will be different. If that hits, keep watching, because this pattern is not random. Today we're breaking down the psychology of people who avoid starting, even when they deeply want to. There's a well-researched reason why your brain can turn a simple beginning into a threat signal. And once you understand the pattern, you stop shaming yourself and start working with your nervous system instead. This is a loop, not your personality. The first sign is that you don't just see the task. You see the whole mountain. You don't think, let me write the first sentence. You think, I need to finish the whole project. Make it perfect, get judged, maybe fail, and then explain why I failed. That is not motivation. That is mental overload. Here's where it gets weird. Your brain is trying to protect you by predicting every possible problem. But prediction can turn into paralysis. Psychologically, this connects to threat scanning. When your brain sees a task as emotionally risky, it starts looking for danger before you even take action. Maybe in the past, mistakes were expensive. Maybe you were criticized quickly. Maybe starting something meant exposing yourself to pressure, comparison, or disappointment. So now, your brain says, let's think more first. But thinking more starts to become the hiding place. The next sign is subtle, but powerful. You tell yourself, I'll start when I'm in the right mood. When the room is cleaner. When your energy is better. When you have the perfect plan. When you feel more confident. But the feeling never fully arrives. Most people miss this one. Readiness often comes after movement, not before it. Your brain wants emotional certainty before action, but confidence is usually built through evidence. And evidence only appears after you do something small. This pattern can come from growing up in environments where being prepared felt safer than being spontaneous. Maybe you learned that if you didn't know exactly what you were doing, you could be embarrassed, corrected, or dismissed. So now, I'm not ready, becomes a protective sentence. But underneath it, the real sentence might be, I don't want to feel exposed. You research, you organize, you create folders, you watch tutorials, you rewrite your schedule. And it feels productive. But nothing actually starts. This is where avoidance gets clever. It wears the costume of preparation. There's a difference between preparing to act and preparing to avoid the discomfort of acting. Your brain gets a little reward from organizing because it reduces uncertainty. It gives you a sense of control without forcing you to face the vulnerable part, doing the thing. This often connects to perfectionism, not the cute kind, the exhausting kind. The kind where the beginning has to be impressive, clean, and efficient. Maybe earlier in life, your effort only felt safe when it produced something good enough for other people. So now, starting messy feels wrong. But every real beginning is messy. Here's where it gets weird. People talk about fear of failure. But some people avoid starting because success would create a new identity. If you start the business, then you have to become the person who keeps showing up. If you start healing, you may have to stop using chaos as proof that nothing can change. If you start posting, creating, studying, applying, training, then the fantasy becomes real. And real things can be judged. That can feel terrifying. Your nervous system may prefer a painful familiar pattern over an unfamiliar better one. Because familiar feels predictable. This is a loop, not your personality. The past connection here is not about blame. It's about adaptation. If staying small once kept you emotionally safe, your brain may still treat visibility as danger. Most people miss this one. You don't start early. You start when panic arrives. The deadline gets close. Your chest tightens. Suddenly, you can focus. And then you tell yourself, see, I work better under pressure. Maybe, but maybe pressure is the only state intense enough to override avoidance. This creates a cycle. Calm feels impossible. Panic becomes the starter button. The brain can become used to urgency as motivation. Over time, normal effort feels too quiet to trust. This may connect to childhood conditioning where attention, praise, or seriousness only came when things became intense. So your system learned, nothing happens until it becomes an emergency. But living this way is expensive. You get things done, but you lose peace. The next sign is subtle, but powerful. You don't think, I need to start this assignment. You think, if I can't do this, what does that say about me? One email becomes proof that you're behind in life. One workout becomes proof that you have no discipline. One blank page becomes proof that you're not creative. That is a heavy emotional load for a simple beginning. When a task becomes tied to identity, your brain protects your self-image by avoiding the test. Because if you don't start, you can still imagine you might have done well. That sounds strange, but avoidance can protect possibility. Maybe you grew up being praised for outcomes more than effort. Maybe being smart, talented, or responsible became something you had to protect. So starting becomes risky because it could challenge the identity people gave you. Here's where it gets weird. The moment you begin, discomfort appears. A little boredom, a little confusion, a little resistance. And your brain says, something is wrong. So you stop. But discomfort is not always a warning. Sometimes it is just the entry fee. Starting requires your brain to shift from imagination to reality. Reality has friction. The plan looked clean in your head. The first step feels awkward in your hands. That awkwardness does not mean you are failing. It means your brain is updating from theory to experience. If you learned early that discomfort meant trouble, rejection, or punishment, your body may now react strongly to normal resistance. So the work is not just be disciplined. The work is learning to stay present while the first few minutes feel uncomfortable. Most people miss this one. All 7 signs point to the same deeper pattern. You're not avoiding the task. You're avoiding the emotional state attached to the task. Pressure, exposure, uncertainty, judgment, disappointment, boredom, responsibility. That's why advice like, just start, can feel insulting. Because you already know starting matters. The problem is that your system has connected starting with threat. So the practical shift is this: make starting emotionally smaller. Not easier in a fake way. Smaller in a real way. Open the document and write one bad sentence. Put on the shoes and walk for 2 minutes. Send the message without rewriting it 12 times. Your brain needs proof that beginning does not have to become a full identity trial. And the proof has to be small enough to actually repeat. You're not broken. You're not secretly lazy. You're not doomed to waste your potential. You have a mechanism that learned to protect you by delaying the moment of exposure. That mechanism probably made sense at some point. Maybe it protected you from criticism. Maybe it protected you from shame. Maybe it protected you from trying hard and still feeling unseen. But what protects you in one season can trap you in another. Avoidance may reduce anxiety for 5 minutes, but it usually increases it for 5 hours. And every time you delay, your brain learns, starting must have been dangerous, because we escaped it. That is the loop. Not your identity. Not your destiny. A loop. And loops can be interrupted. One last thing. The goal is not to become someone who never avoids. That person does not exist. The goal is to become someone who notices avoidance earlier and responds differently. Instead of asking, why am I like this? Ask, what feeling am I trying not to feel right now? That one question changes everything. Because once you name the feeling, the task becomes smaller. Maybe you're not avoiding studying. You're avoiding the fear that you're behind. Maybe you're not avoiding creating. You're avoiding being seen trying. Maybe you're not avoiding change. You're avoiding the grief of admitting you needed change sooner. This is the deeper psychology of people who avoid starting. The first step is rarely about the step. It is about the emotion attached to becoming someone who moves. I've linked something in the description and pinned comment that I think a lot of you will find genuinely useful. It's a bundle of simple structured guides designed to genuinely help you understand your patterns, interrupt avoidance, and build small systems that make starting feel less overwhelming. Comment one word below, start. Not as a performance, just as a signal to yourself that you saw the pattern. Like this video if it helped you feel less alone. And subscribe if you want more psychology explained in a way that is clear, practical, and honest. This video is for educational purposes and not a substitute for professional advice. And remember, This is a loop, not your personality. See you there.